Thank you everyone for joining us today for a cultural competency training session with Breakfast Culture. So this session is being recorded just so that it can be shared with participants afterwards as a learning resource. We won't be sharing it widely and publicly, but just so you're aware, it is being recorded for that purpose. We also have simultaneous interpretation available today. So you can use that service by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select the language of your choice. We also have closed captioning turned on. This is only available in English at this time, but it is there as a resource for you as well. And with that, I don't want to take up too much time or space, so I will hand it over to Jefferson Darrell, who can introduce himself and get us started.
Good day to everyone. I hope everyone's well today. Thank you. I hope everyone's safe and well today. Thank you very much for that, Lauren. Before we get started, I just want to emphasize that this is a safe space. We're going to be discussing issues of privilege, issues of power. If you all recall, when we did that power and privilege training earlier this year, we talked about how we all benefit from various privileges. Just want to stress that some people might feel a little uncomfortable with some of what we'll be discussing. Again, please know that this is a safe space. I also want to stress that some people might feel a bit triggered, but again, please know that this is a safe space. You should have received some English and/or French worksheets to follow along. You'll notice at the bottom here with the Breakfast Culture logo, whenever you see the little spinning egg, typically whenever I'm asking a question, usually the same question is on your worksheets. We'll do our best not to put anyone in the spot. So I won't say, hey, Lauren, what do you think about this? What we typically will ask is, would anyone like to share? And hopefully people will feel comfortable to share. If you don't feel comfortable to share publicly in this space, but you still want to participate, that's what your worksheets are for. So you should have, please let me know if you haven't received the worksheets. Lauren, if you don't mind maybe popping them in the chat again in case people haven't received them in English and French. And the worksheets are there for you to still share your thoughts. And then after the session, if you want to go to someone you trust, a partner, a friend, a colleague, a family member to maybe unpack some of the questions that we asked or some of your answers or responses, please feel free to do that. Again, just things to consider. Please acknowledge that you and others might have moments of discomfort. As I mentioned, some people might feel uncomfortable, some people might feel triggered, but again, know this is a safe space. We'd like to create a space for everyone to have a voice. We're going to try to avoid right and wrong. I ask that you do a lot of active listening, listening to understand versus to respond. Progress is a process. No one has all the correct answers yet. Keep dynamics of power and privilege in mind as well as we continue on this discussion. So I'm going to pause here, see if there are any questions before we get into the agenda. So today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about representation and why it matters. Then we're going to get into some terminology and definitions. And then we're going to jump right into a first activity. It's called the diversity wheel. We'll take about 10, 15 minutes maximum for that exercise. Then we're going to take a look at the actual cultural competence continuum, what we'll be discussing today. Then we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute bio break. And then we're going to get it right into our second activity. This is where we'll be dividing everyone up into groups. It's basically cultural connection conversation starters. We'll take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to go through these questions. That will be your group work. Then we're going to take another break. We're going to talk a little bit about microaggressions. Then we're going to talk about allyship. And then I'm going to end up with just some tips, tools, resources as you continue along your cultural competency journeys. So before we get into representation, any questions again around the agenda? And I see some people put things in the chat. I will do my best to take a look at the chat. If I am missing, please do. I think you can raise your hand. I see the worksheets are in here. Great. So if we're ready to get started, I'm going to begin. So for people who've seen past breakfast culture presentations, we often open up with popular cultural references to demonstrate the importance of representation and why it matters. Now, I suspect that this audience understands the importance of representation and why it matters. And personally, you've all begun your own diversity and inclusion journeys. So instead, in keeping with breakfast culture's pop cultural style, I'm going to share just a couple of television programs that not only entertain, but also educate around issues of cultural diversity. Many of the characters and narratives aren't centered around straight, white, able-bodied males. Although many of them do take place here in North America, they look at different cultures currently living here, including the first peoples to call this land home. So clockwise, from the top left, Bob Hart's Abishola. From award-winning creator, executive producer, and writer Chuck Lorre, Bob Hart's Abishola is a love story about a middle-aged compression sock businessman from Detroit who unexpectedly falls for his cardiac nurse, a Nigerian immigrant, while recovering from a heart attack. And he sets his sights on her to win her over. Undaunted by Abishola's lack of initial interest or the vast differences in their backgrounds, Bob is determined to win Abishola's heart in this comedic examination of immigrant life in America. Reservation Dogs is an Indigenous American teen comedy drama created by Sterling Harjo and Tika Waititi for FX. Reservation Dogs is a half-hour comedy that follows the exploits of 4 Indigenous teenagers in rural Oklahoma. After the death of their 5th member, the crew took to stealing, scheming, and saving in order to vicariously fulfill his dream of reaching the exotic, mysterious, and faraway land of California. It is a notable first in that it features an all-Indigenous writer, director, along with almost an entirely Indigenous North American Indigenous cast and production team. It has received widespread critical acclaim and numerous accolades, including a Peabody Award, 2 Independent Spirit Awards, and nominations for the Critics' Choice Television Awards and the Golden Globes. It was also named one of the best series of 2021 by many television critics. Never Have I Ever. After a traumatic year, an Indian American teen just wants to spruce up her social status, but friends, family, and feelings won't make it easy on her. Created by Mindy Kaling and Lang Fisher. Sort of. A Canadian production created by Bial Biag and Fab Filippo for CBC. It stars Biag as Sabi Mahbub, a non-binary millennial trying to balance their roles as a child of Pakistani immigrant parents and a bartender at an LGBTQ+ bookstore and cafe, as well as a caregiver for children for a professional couple. Now, I personally like it because it not only deals with issues of race, but also the intersectionality of trans and gender issues. Miss Marvel, for the MCU fans in the audience today, Miss Marvel is an American television miniseries created by Bisha K. Ali for Disney+, based on the Marvel comics featuring the character Kamala Khan or Miss Marvel. It follows Kamala Khan, a 16-year-old fangirl of the Avengers who struggles to fit in until she gains her own powers. And finally, Kim's Convenience, a Canadian success story created by Ines Troy about a Korean-Canadian family that runs a convenience store in Toronto's Moss Park neighborhood. Pardon me. It has been lauded globally for its accurate depiction of the immigrant experience in North America for many different ethnic groups. Now, I share these programs with you as they are great pieces of entertainment, but they also subtly and often not so subtly weave in lessons around cultural differences and similarities, as well as lessons around racism, sexism, homophobia, gender issues, transphobia, ableism, immigration, shadism, sexual orientation. I could go on. But again, what's the purpose of all these pop cultural references? It demonstrates that the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion and how they resonate in the zeitgeist for people who are often underrepresented. Ultimately, what I hope you'll take away from this is that representation matters. So before we continue, I just want to define some terms that I'll be using today. First term is diversity. Now, for the purposes of our conversation, The word diversity means to ensure that the people employed by and engage with your organization are representative of the local or regional populations, including ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs. I could go on. Now, it's important to remember that diversity refers to groups of people. An individual themselves cannot be diverse, but a group of individuals can be. Essentially, diversity is the mix of people in a group, whether that be your stakeholders, your staff, or even in the images that you use for your marketing and your communication. For example, many workforces in Canada are indeed extremely diverse, meaning there are a wide range of individuals working there. There's men, there's women, Caucasian, Asian, cisgendered, transgendered, and more. Unfortunately, many of our management teams and boardrooms in Canada are not that diverse. As my friends across the pond in the UK say, a lot of organizations typically look like a pint of Guinness. Now, this lack of diversity is often repeated in the images portrayed, in the marketing that we put out there. It's often repeated in, as I said, that pint of Guinness, what a management team or what company cultures often looks like. And they're not always reflective of the communities where they serve. So if you look on your worksheets, we're actually going to move on to our first activity, the diversity wheel. If you take a look on your worksheets, there's a whole question where I talk about, we look at ERA, organizational, external, internal. So when we're looking at the diversity wheel, we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes right now. So it is, what, 1:14, so say about 1:30 or so. I want you to take a look and think about how you identify looking at these aspects of the diversity wheel. So ERA, for example, things like historical events, world events, political events, cultural events. What informs your worldview? For example, for me, I'm Gen X. I remember the fall of the Berlin Wall. I remember 9/11. I remember, what's another big one? Well, the murder of George Floyd, for example. Other people might remember other things based on their ages. World War II, for example. They might remember, I'm trying to think of another older historical event. Anyone feel free to chime in here. From an organizational lens, what's your management status or title? What's your work location? What's your department or division? What's your seniority, your tenure? Union affiliation. I've been affiliated with a union, for example, OPSU Local 549. Externally, what's your socioeconomic status? What's your geographical location? I'm right now located in, thank you, release Mandela from prison. Thank you for that one. Sarah, what's your geographic location? Right now I'm downtown Toronto and it's snowing outside and the snow is sticking. Ick. Other aspects, family status, relationship status, what's your religious or belief system? What's your appearance, your citizenship? Internally, what's your age? What's your race? What's your national origin? Personally, are you more extroverted? Are you more introverted? Are you a bit more left brain, right brain? So I want you to go through your worksheets right now. There should be a page where you can write down just some of these aspects. And please keep this in mind when we get to the next exercise and as we ask questions, because a lot of what's informing your worldview might be different for other folks as well. So as I said, it's about 1:16 now. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to go through and work on your worksheets to fill this out. Oh, another great era one, Roe versus Wade, the first time that had happened could be one for some people. Now, please note some of your characteristics may not necessarily fall within these categories. Please note them as well if there are other characteristics that may not have been covered here. So up next, I would like to talk about equity and accessibility. Equity is not the same thing as equality. Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. And I hope that my diagram here, where we see equality, 4 different people, but everyone gets the exact same bike. And as you can see here, that works for 1 person out of these 4 people. Equity, everyone gets a bike that is suitable for them. So now all 4 people, the tall, the small, the person in the wheelchair, has a bike that works for them. So that's the difference between equity versus equality. Now, accessibility is simply the ability to access. We have French interpreters here today for the Francophones in the audience. I believe that CanWatch has also put subtitles on for those who may be a bit hard of hearing. So again, equity and accessibility. Privilege. Privilege is any unearned benefit or advantage that one receives in society by nature of their identity. Examples of aspects of identity that can afford privilege include ethnicity, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, class, wealth, ability, citizenship status, or more. Simply put, privilege is the other side of oppression, which often makes it harder to see. It is easier to notice the oppression you experience than the privilege you experience, because being mistreated is likely to leave a bigger impression on you than being treated fairly. When you are accustomed to privilege, equity can feel like oppression. Now, there are many different forms of privilege, and recognizing your privilege is important as you begin to navigate this space. For example, for me personally, I'm a Black, gay, able-bodied, cisgender male, and I never thought of myself as having any form of privilege. Now, I want you to think if you believe that you have any privilege. Let's play a game. Another activity is coming up. So on your worksheets, you'll see the privilege game. Now here, I've just listed 7 privileges that are valued here in Canada, in North America. Now, please note, this is not a complete list of privileges, but just some of the more common privileges that are valued here in North America. So we have male, we have heterosexual, we have socioeconomic privilege, we have cisgender privilege, we have Caucasian privilege, we have able-bodied privilege, we have Christian. So these are just 7 aspects that are quite common here in North America. Now, as I continue on my own journey, I've come to realize that I have lots of privileges. I'm male, I'm cisgender, I'm able-bodied, I have socioeconomic privilege, and I was brought up in the Christian faith. So in this game, I would score 5 out of 7. Now that's a high score. So I'm just curious, for those of you who are following along, I hope you're joining in on the quiz as well. Curious what your score was, and does anyone want to share? Feel free to pop a number into the chat if you like, or you can turn your microphone off and speak out a number. If anyone would like to share, I'll give you 30 seconds for that now. I'm seeing some numbers coming up. I'm seeing a 4, 5 out of 7. Privilege also linked to language, exactly. 6s, seeing a few 6 out of 7s. Another 4. Yep, you're right, language is another one I could have used. As I said, I just picked 7. Frankly, there's many, many different forms of privilege. Thank you all for sharing. Up next, I want to talk about inclusion. Now, inclusion is a sense of belonging, of feeling respected and valued for who you are as an individual or as a group. It is feeling a level of supportive energy and commitment from others so that you can do your best at work. Now, the process of inclusion engages each individual and makes people feel valued. Individuals function at full capacity and feel more valued and included within the organization's mission. Now, this culture shift creates higher performing organizations where motivation and morale soar. Nina Simon, the former executive director of the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, suggests that organizations hang invisible welcome or not welcome signs above their doors, and that each group of people sees a different sign. For example, a person who is differently abled may approach the doors of an organization and see a not welcome sign in the stairs that don't include a ramp or an elevator, while an able-bodied person sees a welcome sign. Now, inclusion is about hanging as many welcome signs as possible and asking ourselves which not welcome signs remain. On that vein, and in the interest of language, CanWatch has graciously translated a lot of these slides into French. So for the Francophones who are following along, I believe they put them earlier up in the chat. You should be able to download a PDF version of all of this in French as well. And again, inclusion. The reason why I want to talk about inclusion is because everyone is talking about diversity these days, especially here in Canada. In fact, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, regularly reminds us how diversity is Canada's strength. Now, it's true. Canada is an extremely diverse country. But here's the T. Diversity means absolutely nothing without inclusion. So now that we're armed with some of the definitions and terminology, I suspect that many of you are going to need to, sell this up the chain, so to speak, up that ladder. Let's use that phrase instead. And that business case for diversity and inclusion, for the board level, senior management team, executive leadership team. Now, this is the point in the presentation where I would normally inundate you with a lot of facts and numbers. But I hope you're going to clap now because I'm not going to do that because that's going to be a little bit boring. And I just wanted to state here that for decades, countless management consultants, industry organizations have published white papers, research papers outlining the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion for business. If you go to breakfastculture.ca, you'll see some links to some of these papers on your worksheets. There are links to these papers as well. I'm just going to read a couple for you here. You can read this as yourself as we continue along. But McKinsey, gender diverse companies are 15% more likely to outperform their national industry median. PwC Global, 85% of CEOs found diversity and inclusion improve the bottom line. Boston Consulting Group, more diverse management teams result in 19% higher revenue. Deloitte, 83% of millennials more actively engaged when they believe they are in an inclusive culture. So, I mean, a lot of this research and work has been done for us already in terms of the importance and that business case for D&I. That should also be a question on your worksheet. What is your organization's business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion? So now we're going to take a look at the cultural competence continuum. Please note that we're going to actually be visiting each one of these levels from 0 to 5 in more depth with examples of how they manifest in the workplace. But before we do this, I want to ask each of you to note where you currently think you are on the continuum and what you think your ideal learning objective might be. So level 0, denial. Forced assimilation, subjugation, rights and privileges for dominant groups only. Level 1, defense. Xenophobia, so racism, sexism, etc. Maintaining stereotypes, unfair hiring practices. And again, we're looking at the cultural competence continuum through the lens of the workplace, just so people are aware. Level 2, minimization. Differences are ignored. Let's treat everyone the same. We'll only meet the needs of the dominant group. Level 3, acceptance. Let's start exploring cultural issues. Let's be committed. Let's assess the needs of the organization and the individuals who work here. Level 4, adaptation. Let's recognize individual and cultural differences. Let's seek advice from diverse groups. Let's hire culturally unbiased staff. And finally, up to level 5, integration. Let's implement changes to improve services based upon cultural needs. So an ideal learning objective will be level 4, adaptation. So before we continue, again, I want you to note on your worksheets where you currently think you reside on the continuum and what your ideal learning objectives might be. And I'm just curious, would anyone like to share? Okay, I am going to move on. Oh, we have someone. Thank you for sharing. We have someone who suggested they think they're level 3. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I see another level 3. Great. So now we're going to delve into the definitions a little bit more for what level 0 looks like, all the way up to what level 5 looks like. And then we're going to take a look at, I'm just fictionally using the name Chad here, and we'll take a look at Chad and how level 0 or 5 Chad might implement something like that within the workplace. So level 0, cultural destructiveness. Again, we had a little chat about that, forced assimilation, privilege for dominant groups only. They don't believe in cultural differences. They believe that people who behave or look different don't necessarily know any better. They tend to impose their own value system on others, knowing that, you know what, I'm right, you're the one who's confused. So I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions about this before we move into what this might look like in the workplace. Actually, you know what? I'm going to actually jump to what this might look like in the workplace, and then we'll have a bit more of a discussion. So let's see how this might look in the work, might manifest itself in the workplace with Chad. Chad's fictional. He is a straight, white, able-bodied, English-speaking Christian cis male. Chad often calls colleagues by the wrong name. He mistakes his colleagues for someone else of the same ethnicity. During the interview process, candidates from diverse groups, they have more steps they have to take, more testing they have to go through. And Chad has doubts about their credentials and skills. He questions Lee's work more than his other teammates, even though Lee is one of the top performers in the company. But Lee also went to a university that Chad has never heard of. And Lee is also from a diverse background. So now that I've read some examples of level 0 cultural destructiveness and how it might look in the workplace, see the difference, stomp it out through our fictional Chad. I hope no one's named Chad in the group today. I'm just curious if anyone might want to share other examples of how level 0 might show up in the workplace. I'm going to ask you, again, you can either type something into the chat or you can take your microphone off and share verbally and vocally with us. Would anyone like to share?
I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Lauren. Oh, sorry, that's not Lauren. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry. No, it's fine. My name's Juliana from CanWatch. You know, you said that Chad is fictional. Unfortunately, maybe not named Chad, but this character is not fictional. I think we've all run into Chads before. But yeah, just witnessing being in meetings where Chad seems like the sort of person that would listen to maybe somebody that looks and sounds like him. And then, you know, if there's another individual that doesn't look and sound like him, would say the exact same thing, but then would, you know, he would make it his own idea, or he would talk over that individual. I've witnessed that, unfortunately, so many times.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Juliana. And thank you for also pointing out that Chad may not be so fictional. In this case, I'm using it fictionally, using Chad fiction, but I'm sure we've all run into Chads or Karens as well. And again, I'm just using that name for obvious reasons in the workplace. Would anyone else like to share? Thank you, Juliana. And again, you can also share on your worksheets too. So I'm going to move to the next level then. So level 1, cultural incapacity. So in this case, we see people maintaining stereotypes and xenophobia. So maintaining the racism, maintaining the sexism, maintaining that ableism. They begin to realize that their values are not absolute. Also, they're not necessarily happy about this. They might feel a little threatened by differences. They may believe that other cultures are inferior, but they know better than to impose their values. I'm just going to keep quiet about it. They view differences in a negative way versus a positive way. So now we're going to revisit Chad, or Karen, if you will. I did happen to use Chad in this case. Let's revisit Chad again and see how this might look in the workplace. It might manifest in the workplace. So Chad, in this case, avoids speaking about racism or just any form of discrimination because he doesn't want to say the wrong thing. During a client meeting, his senior colleague from a diverse background was mistaken for being a junior employee. Chad did not correct the client or support his colleague. Chad believes that there is no way he could be racist because he knows people of color and eats food from all over the world. Chad said to a colleague of color, quote, "I can't believe you are a scientist. You are just not what I thought a scientist would look like." End of quote. Can anyone else think of other ways that level 1, cultural incapacity, might manifest in the workplace with Chad and or Karen? Would anyone like to share? So I'm going to share an example from my own workplace. Often I will be in a meeting and there'll be someone either senior, usually it's my boss's boss, or an external client who doesn't necessarily know me, and my manager will say, "Hey, Jefferson, this was your idea. Why don't you make the presentation?" So I'll make the presentation. And often the first phrase I'm going to say, because it's often positioned as a compliment, is, wow, Jefferson, you're so articulate. And I'm thinking, what did you expect me to be? Did you not expect me to be articulate? Why didn't you think I would be articulate? I mean, they asked me to make the presentation, did they not? Anyways, that's just something that I've often observed or witnessed from my own personal background. Again, another chance for anyone to share how level 1 might manifest itself in the workplace. Oh, I see one from Vivian. Thank you, Vivian. I do apologize. French is not my first language. C'est tout simplement l'ignorance et la peur de l'autre. Simple ignorance of the other, I believe. Ce sont des stereotypes. It speaks to stereotypes and prejudices. Is that what you're saying, Vivian? I'm not quite sure. I apologize. If we have the translator there, that would be wonderful. The translator could maybe translate that for us. Oh, thank you for that, Vivian. Merci, Vivian. And thank you for sharing. So let's look at level 2, cultural blindness. In this case, differences are ignored, and people believe in, let's treat everyone the same, which often only meets the needs of that dominant group. They may trivialize the differences. They believe that as different as people are, they are more similar than different, and assume that people share the same values and beliefs. Now, I know when we get to level 2, this can be a bit challenging for folks. I know it's quite challenging for me personally as well, when, you know, especially with the work that I do in terms of trying to find common ground. But let's take a look at how level 2 might manifest itself in the workplace. So Chad, or Karen, is a member of the social committee at work. Again, here we're talking about cultural blindness, minimization. You see the difference, but you act like you don't. So Chad or Karen is a member of the social committee at work, and they help to organize events based on shared values, let's say the Christmas party. So when the committee decides, you know what, we want to organize an event around anti-racism, Chad rejects the idea. He believes that, well, everyone is treated the same, so there's no need to have this conversation. He doesn't see color. Now, when a junior colleague spoke with Chad about an incident of racism that they experienced, Chad swept it under the rug. He dismissed the story, and he failed to acknowledge that the racist incident. Again, I'm just going to ask, I'm doing this for each level. Can anyone think of an example from their own workplace, perhaps, or in general, of another example of level 2 cultural blindness? Oh, I see a hand up. Thank you very much, Bart Dickinson. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think this is the equality approach as opposed to the equity approach, right? It's the people who claim that we live in a post-racial world, which are so often very privileged individuals who are afforded that opportunity to think that that's the way the world works. I can't think of any kind of concrete examples, but it's that kind of mentality that you know, I've moved on and therefore society has moved on, and so it's really not an equity-based approach.
Thank you very much, Bart, for sharing. I do have an actual example that frankly did happen to me personally. My previous career was in the creative spaces, marketing, public relations. And I loved what I did. I would get very excited. I remember I'd be very like, oh my God, I have a great idea, I have a great idea. And this is what I would do. And I apologize. I don't mean this to sound homophobic, even though it is going to sound homophobic. This to me feels more gay than anything else. But I was often told that me going, oh, I have an idea I'm excited about. My manager, who was a white woman, would always tell me that I came off as assertive and aggressive when I would do that. And then my colleague, who's a white woman, she would get just as excited. Instead of this, she would literally put her hand in my manager's face and tell her to stop. No, wait, stop. No, I've got the idea. with her hand like this close to my manager's face. And I remember saying to my manager, asking my manager, how come this isn't viewed as assertive and aggressive, but me doing this is considered assertive and aggressive? And my manager would say that, oh, well, you know, your colleague is just passionate about the idea. And I remember thinking, interesting. Me going like this, which is basically hands up in the air, not aggressively putting my hand right literally in your face, is considered assertive and aggressive, but putting one's hand right in someone's face is considered passionate. Anyhow, that's another, you know, for another discussion, but that's another example here. And thank you again, Bart, for sharing. So let's look at level 3, cultural pre-competence. So people at level 3, they're committed to exploring cultural issues, to assessing the needs of the organization and individuals. They accept differences as legitimate and complex. They accept other value systems and behavior norms. They're not threatened by difference. They're tolerant and have a sympathetic attitude. Now, let's see how this might manifest in the workplace. Chad, or Karen, started the Diversity and Inclusion Council in his office. He recognized that the organization had to do better at addressing equity and inclusion. When a junior colleague spoke with Chad about an incident of racism that they had experienced, he acknowledged the racist incident, and he went to HR and asked for advice on how to ensure that consequence occurs for the behavior. Chad, in fact, started a book club in the office about anti-racism and oppression to have a way to educate himself while also learning more about his colleagues. So would anyone like to share examples where Chad or Karen is starting to, you know, embrace acceptance, seeing the differences and acting appropriately? Would anyone like to share here some examples? Either you can put something in the chat or you can turn your microphone off.
Oh, hi.
I see someone. Is that
yeah,
Sarah?
Sorry. Yes, it is. Hi.
Thank you,
I'll
Sarah.
just put my video on for a minute. Would that be something like maybe doing a training session, like saying we're going to have like a diversity, equity, inclusion training session that all people must attend, but then it's just like one session or something like that?
That's one way that it can manifest in the workplace. You're correct. Again, I'm not looking holistically here. I'm just looking for examples. So I think that's a great example, Sarah. Yes. Because Chad actually did that. He started a book club, in this case about anti-racism and oppression. I see another example. Thank you, Molly. Someone who is making efforts to pronounce names correctly. Thank you for that. Anyone else? So let's move on to the next one. Level 4, cultural competence. People at level 4 recognize individual and cultural differences. They seek advice from diverse groups. They value and celebrate cultural differences. They're willing and able to change their own behavior to adapt to different norms. They're able to empathize with people from different backgrounds. Oh, sorry, I see another example from Scott asking about people's pronouns. Thank you, Scott. Now, again, let's see how this might manifest in the workplace. So again, we're talking about adaptation, seeing the difference, understanding the difference that differences make. So Chad believes that all employees in the organization, not just HR, are responsible for creating a fair, equitable, and inclusive environment. Chad heard another colleague asking if they could touch another colleague's hair. He acknowledged that a microaggression had taken place and took action to address it. As a senior leader, Chad makes the case why his organization should continue to invest in resources that, invest resources into diversity and inclusion, even though the organization has had a bad fiscal quarter. What are some other examples of level 4 cultural competence that Chad or Karen might exhibit? Anyone like to share? Here's an example. I remember for me personally, I was in a meeting once, and frankly, the dominant culture in this case were a bunch of men. I'm sure that's no surprise for many people here. And I remember in the meeting, there's a woman speaking who came up with, frankly, the idea we needed. And I thought it was interesting that nobody was listening to her in the meeting. Finally, one of the managers, not her manager, spoke up and said, look, you know, Karen's brought up a very relevant point. We need to listen to Karen. And then, you know, yielded the floor to Karen. Karen made their point for the third time now. Finally, people heard Karen and listened to Karen. So that's just another example from my own personal. I see someone else has included, I think that's Scott again, learning about different holidays and acknowledging them. Thank you, Scott. Anyone else have any other examples of how cultural competence, adaptation, see the difference, understand the difference that differences make, may manifest in the workplace? Okay, I'm going to move on to level 5, cultural proficiency. So in this case, we're going, people here will implement changes to improve services based on needs. They believe that they can believe what they believe, but they can still accept the differences of others. They adapt to suit the culture and needs of the people that they are with. So now let's see how this might manifest in the workplace. So Chad acknowledges his own privilege and is committed to identifying issues of race and oppression. Chad vocally supports the work of colleagues from underrepresented groups through mentorship and sponsorship. When someone proposes a good idea, Chad will repeat it and give them credit during the meeting. For example, I agree with Helen's recommendation for improving our strategy. So again, this is integration. You see the difference, you respond positively, you engage, and you adapt. Any examples, other examples that people can think for level 5? And then we're going to go into our break, and we're going to come back for our activity. Oh, I see another one from Viviane. Merci, Viviane. In the chat. I do apologize if my French is not quite that proficient. Acceptez que je porte mon foulard attaché à l'Africaine Incapacity. Alors, accepting that I wear my scarf tied to the African as well as my outfits while my former boss did not accept it. Thank you, Natalie. For level 4.
Welcome.
Let's see. I think that's a great example. Any other examples that people might like to share before we move into the break? Okay. Before we go into the break, because that's next, I'm just going to give you a quick little spoiler. So the exercise we're going to do before, when we get back from the break, we're going to take about 5 minutes, little bio break, refill your water bottles, your teacups, washroom break, or what have you. Again, keeping in mind that first activity where we looked at different aspects of her personality, we're going to break everyone up into groups, small groups of about 5 to 6 people each. And we're going to answer 6 of these questions. You'll also find them on your worksheets. And I want you to talk as a group about all these different questions. We'll come back to this though after the break, but I just wanted to give you a little spoiler so you have an idea of what we're going to do. So we're going to take 5 minutes right now. It is 1:55. We're going to come right back at 2 o'clock. So please enjoy your break. Okay, welcome back from the break. So now I'm going to need my technical folks from CamWatch to help break us up in meetings. I say we have 22 participants. So I'm going to recommend that we do, I'm thinking 4 groups of 5 and then 2 groups of 6. These are the questions before we jump into the breakout rooms. Here are the questions. What were some of the birthday traditions in your family growing up? What was important to you as a child about birthdays? And do you still keep up those traditions? So I want you to have this discussion within your groups. There's also, the questions are also listed on your worksheets. How and when does your family celebrate the new year? I'm talking about our current calendar new year or other new years, for example, Lunar New Year. What tradition do you have around new babies when a baby's born in your family? How do you celebrate the coming of a new baby? What do you do for the arrival? Is there anything you might do special within that first year? Now, I want you to describe a holiday tradition that you enjoy, any type of holiday tradition that you might enjoy. What food, we are breakfast culture after all, so what food served in your family growing up that in this case you really didn't like? Or maybe one that you liked. If you wanted to serve a visitor a meal that would help them to understand your own cultural heritage, what meal would you serve? So we're going to take about 45 minutes to an hour, break up into your little groups. So again, when you are responding to these questions, I want you to also think about the activity we did earlier in terms of your personality and what's informing some of your responses compared to some of your colleagues, especially if they're different, different ages, different cultures, different genders. Welcome back, everyone. I had a chance to visit each one of the groups and I heard some amazing stories. Just a few things I heard. I'm not going to attribute to anyone. If you feel like saying that was me, feel free. One of my personal favorites was, we don't just do a birthday, we do a birthday week. And now that we're older, it's turned into a birthday month. And I was like, ooh, I need to celebrate like that. Another birthday tradition was a trip to the ocean. We always like to be by water, which I thought was quite beautiful. One around New Year's Eve was, we always like to light a fire pit and sit around the fire and talk about what we want to embrace in the new year. And what was interesting there, the person who shared had young children, and they were talking about how they've started this tradition with their children. I think they're under age of 10. And a few people pointed out, it's like, wow, what a lovely tradition to start with kids, especially to, put them in the mindset for that new year. Under babies, I heard baby quilt was one tradition. One of my favorite ones in the group, one of the groups, which I definitely agree with, was well, one of our traditions is we just eat a lot on the holidays. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you could be in my family too for that one. So I actually am going to take back and put a couple people on the spot, more the groups. If any group, before we jump into, we have about 10 minutes left before the next break. If a volunteer from each group wouldn't mind just sort of, again, you don't have to attribute everything, just share some things that you thought about the exercise, some of the traditions that you came, were there any, similarities or some insights that came out of this exercise and your thoughts? There were what, 4 groups, I believe. So would anyone like to start from one of the different groups?
Sure, I can go.
Thank you, Juliana.
We had a lovely chat, and kudos, it was great. And I just love my group. Thanks, everybody. But when we first got out of the call, it was very obvious that, from just the way we all looked, that we were probably from similar backgrounds. I mean, that was the assumption that I had made when we got in there. And then, of course, when you get into the deeper conversations, and I was saying this to Jefferson when he jumped into our group, that those questions are just so great because it's this lovely way to get to know somebody without directly asking those questions. I just thought it was brilliant. So we had a lovely conversation. Those guiding questions were amazing. And then at the end of it, it was really beautiful because we all realized, when we were talking about the food, I think that's when we all got the most excited in our group, talking about the food. But then we realized that a lot of the, traditional food, I mean, Vera has a Ukrainian background. So a lot of her tradition that was amazing to hear about. But then we realized that Canada really is a melting pot. There's nothing really like traditional to Canada unless we go back to the original peoples of the land, our Indigenous peoples, and those are traditional Canadian foods. And then everything else is sort of like a melting pot of different traditions with a lot of English and French influence. And so, yeah, just sort of like, it was a really nice wrap up to that conversation.
Right.
Just
Thank
some
you,
highlights
Juliana,
there.
beautiful wrap up as well. Next group, please. Erica, thank you.
Somebody else spoke at the same time. Obianuju. Do you want to go first? Okay. Thanks. Well, I'll try to be quick. D'abord, merci aux collègues, Rosie, Nathalie, Elisabeth, et Viviane, et moi-même. We were a small group of francophones and probably other language phones. despite the very diverse origins that were represented in our group, one thing came as a very key element of any celebration, and that was food. And food, from the food, you know, you eat for birthdays to your favorite food, like peanuts and sweet potatoes for Rosie, or Viviane, there was, you know, manioc and fish, and I think, and many other foods, but the food was really tied, I had the impression, to also some nostalgia from home. So, a lot of people in the group, well, most of us, I guess, are immigrants, or, you know, recently Canadians, or one Quebecois, but who has traveled a lot. And so I could sense the sharings about food that there was a lot of nostalgia from home and family. So the food, family is another aspect that, and I'll get back to some more food because it's going to make you hungry if you don't be careful. But it's so another key part of these celebrations were really a family. And despite all the very diverse origins of our group, there seemed to be a sort of leading thread of more various kinds of Christian celebrations. So Christmas, but also like La Toussaint, All Saints Day, and the Day of the Dead, around what is here, I guess, Halloween. So about those holidays, one thing we sort of also briefly discussed is that, interestingly, through the journey of immigration, our relationship to these celebrations may have changed. And so while in the beginning or in the first years here, you stay attached to your home traditions or home family traditions, you start also adopting some of the traditions here. So in the first years, you don't celebrate Halloween, and now you do, for instance. So yes, when I say a very diverse group, there was one with roots in Gabon, the DRC Congo, Lubumbashi, and also Montreal and Quebec, and also France and Holland. And our colleague from Quebec is in her heart Senegalese. Sorry. So it was very lively conversation about traditions, about babies. One thing, before I get to babies, about birthdays, of course, there was more chat about, going to the restaurant or things like that. There was a mention of, eating a special food, or the greeting. So, for instance, that you're not the only one receiving wishes, but your family also does too. Congratulations on your sister's birthday. It's a thing in some countries like Holland. And well, we're not wanting to take up too much time. There was a lot of sharing also around traditions around babies. For sure, you congratulate and such, but for instance, there also a practice of massaging the baby when they're small, and using shea butter, and it seemed like a very important practice in some places. So there were similarities, but there's also the ability and taste to adapt to new environments, to new settings, and where you live. And in terms of the prepared food that we'd prepare to help others understand your cultural heritage, is that okay if I say names? Les collègues, je peux vous nommer. Elisabeth in Montreal would prepare a smoked meat, and Natalie would prepare yassa chicken. Actually, she would have her spouse. She's lucky to live with a spouse who cooks, and yassa chicken. And another, I think, Rosie is, we didn't mention exactly, maybe sweet potatoes and peanuts and various dishes. So in any case, great variety of very tasty foods and pleasure into and joy into sharing about these with somewhat nostalgia. So
thank you very much for sharing, Erica. There's there's two more groups, I believe.
I could take a stab. So just we also had a very lively, great discussion with the colleagues on the call. And one thing maybe that wasn't mentioned so much, we actually finished quite quickly. The food discussions and great traditions, but also we actually revisited a bit more Chad and Karen and how tricky it is also. And so we actually discussed you know, the use of you guys, gang, and kind of our kind of more formal talk, but also just sharing, you know, one instance of how to ensure diversity with a steering committee, but putting percentages, and, you know, it's not obvious to get to, you know, step 5 and really be conscious and aware. So we were just also sharing some of those examples of how we would want to strive towards better, but it's not always so obvious of saying, you know, oh, the Christmas season, the holidays, holiday season, what's best. And so we're also discussing that quite a bit. I don't know if Kim, Bart, Jennifer, anything else to add?
I think that was great, Victoria. And that was just a fantastic conversation. We went right to the end, and then we had a minute time warning, and we used it all up and didn't join you guys until it lapsed. So it was really fantastic.
Great, thank you. And I think there was one more group. Thank you, Victoria and Bart. I think there's one more group.
I guess I can speak for the group. Hi everyone, my name is Molly. Yeah, so we used our whole time only discussing the questions. We just got to the end of the questions with a few minutes to spare. I mean, I think it echoes a lot of what people have said. We got excited about the food aspects. In some cases, we shared a lot of similarities in the fact that we don't carry on a lot of traditions from our childhood, or we didn't have specific ways of celebrating birthdays. So that was one thing that I thought of to share. I don't know if there's anything else that others want to jump in with.
Well, thanks, Molly. So at this point, we usually do take another quick break, 5-10 minutes. I'm going to recommend 5. We have about just under 20 to 30 minutes of content. We're actually going to go into how to be an ally with all of this, some other resources as well. So I'm just going to post to the group in the interest of time. Do we want to take another, say, 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes for a quick bio break, refill our water bottles, and come back, or do we want to just plow right through? What are we thinking as a group? Okay, since no one seemed to be responding, I'm going to make the decision. We're going to take a quick little bio break. So it's 3:03. We're going to come back at 3:05, so just under 3 minutes. And we're back. So now we're going to quickly, I'd like to just play a short little video here about microaggressions. Often people who are marginalized for whatever reason, whether it's gender, race, ability, sexual orientation, and more, there's often a stigma that is associated with them. For example, for me, I've often been referred to as ABM, or angry Black man, especially when I bring up these issues. There are similar expressions that are used for women. I'm sure we can all think of some right now that are used for LGBTQ plus peoples and more. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about microaggressions. It is a term that is used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative, prejudicial slights and insults towards any marginalized group. Please note there is an expletive in this video, but it does make sense when you watch the video.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem.
Oh, you're so well spoken.
Just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while.
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date.
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
Going grocery shopping.
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
Commuting to work.
So when are you going to have a baby?
Watching TV.
We have to keep Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
Or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Shopping is so bad now. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day.
Can I touch your hair?
Multiple times a day.
So pretty. Can I touch it?
Please.
Can I please?
Is fucking annoying. That makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
My dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
It looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So now we're just going to talk a little bit about how to be an ally when it comes to cultural competency, or just, especially within the workplace. I'm just going to, again, play another quick little video for you, courtesy of Francesca Ramsey.
Hey friends, so I'm trying something different with my setup and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they ask you to help, but you've never built a house before. So it'd probably be a good idea for you to put on some protective gear and listen to the person in charge. Otherwise, someone's going to get seriously hurt. Look, I'm helping. It's the exact same idea when it comes to being an ally. An ally is a person that wants to fight for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. We need your help building this house, but you probably should listen so you know what to do first. Let's do this. So here are my 5 tips for being a good ally. Understand your privilege. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the word privilege, so let me break it down for you nice and easy. Privilege does not mean that you are rich, that you have an easy life, that everything's been handed to you and you've never had to struggle or work hard. All it means is that there are some things in life that you will not experience or ever have to think about just because of who you are. It's kind of like those horses that have those blinders on. They can see just fine. There's just a whole bunch of stuff on the side that they don't even know exists. So for example, there are currently 29 states where you can legally be fired for being gay. And there are 34 states where you can legally be fired for being trans. Now, as a straight cis woman, those are things that I don't have to ever think about if I don't want to. I'm not going to be fired because I'm straight, and I'm not going to be fired because I'm cis. So it makes sense that before I can fight for the rights of others, I have to understand what rights I have and others don't. That's privilege. Listen and do your homework. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not possible for you to learn if you aren't willing to listen. So you got to know when to zippa the lippa. I don't know. You get what I mean. But that's the thing that's so cool about social media. There are so many people sharing their stories all around the world and connecting with people that they normally would never get a chance to without the power of the internet. So do your homework. Start reading blogs, tweets, news articles, and stories so that you can get caught up on the issues that are important to the communities that you want to support. Speak up, but not over. If the fight for equality was a girl group, the ally wouldn't be the lead singer or the second lead singer. They'd be Michelle. An ally's job is to support. You want to make sure that you use your privilege and your voice to educate others, but make sure to do it in such a way that does not speak over the community members that you're trying to support or take credit for things that they are already saying. This isn't Mario Kart. Stay in your lane. Realize that you're going to make mistakes and apologize when you do. Nobody's perfect. Unlearning problematic things takes time and work, so you are bound to mess up and trip and fall. But don't worry, you can brush yourself off and get right back up. And back up! Just remember that it's not about your intent, it's about your impact. So when you get called out, make sure to listen, apologize, commit to changing your behavior, and move forward. Last but certainly not least, actually the most important thing on this list is remember that ally is a verb. Saying you're an ally is not enough. You got to do the work. 1 through 4, 1 through 4. As always, there are links in the video description box to some of the things I mentioned in this video, along with some resources that have been really helpful for me as I've gone along in my journey to be more conscious. So I want to hear from you in the comments. What are some sites that you suggest checking out? And what are some things that have helped you become a better ally? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and help see you when I see you. Bye!
So again, if you look in your worksheets, you'll see some other examples of allyship. I just thought I'd share this one, courtesy Presley Pizzo, where they've used the analogy of boots and sandals in terms of allyship and quite, in this case, literally stepping on someone's toes. And some of the, when it comes to oppression, and some of the problems and responses. And often it helps people to see and understand this a bit easier. So again, we're thinking of people who are wearing boots and sandals and stepping on their toes. So when it comes to being an ally, it's around centering yourself. You know, I can't believe you think I'm a toe stepper. I'm a good person. Denial that others' experiences are different from your own. Well, I don't mind when people step on my toes. Derailing. Well, you know, some people don't even have toes. Why aren't we talking about them instead? Refusal to center the impacted. Well, all toes matter. Tone policing. Well, I'd move my foot if you would ask me more nicely. Denial that the problem is fixable. Well, toes get stepped on is a fact of life. You'll be better off when you accept that. Victim blaming. You shouldn't have been walking around with people with boots anyway. Withdrawing. Well, I thought you wanted my help, but I guess not. I'm just going to go home. Now, let's take a look at that analogy again, only this way from an ally lens. How can we take all of these components like center the impacted and turn them into a more positive experience, especially help us to learn to react when we do commit these microaggressions. So center the impacted. Oh my God, are you okay? Listen to their response and learn from it. Apologize for the impact, even though you didn't intend to step on their toes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Stop the instance. Just move your foot. Stop that pattern. Be careful where you step in the future. When it comes to oppression, we want to actually change the footwear to get rid of privilege and oppression. So maybe sneakers for all. Again, we can only stretch these metaphors so far. So now before we get wrap up into some tips and tools, I want to go back to and revisit the Cultural Competence Continuum. So now that you have a better understanding of the Cultural Competence Continuum, you've had some questions, some discussions. I'm just curious, has anyone changed, number one, where they think they currently are on the continuum? Or has anyone maybe changed their ideal learning objective after going through the exercises today? Does anyone want to share if anyone's changed where they think they currently are or where they think their learning objective should be? You can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand through here or turn on your microphone rather and share. Anyone? Okay, if no one wants to share, I'm going to move on. So finally, just to wrap things up, I hope some of you are thinking, you know what, Jefferson, I'm ready to start, I just don't know where to begin. Quite a bit of this work has been done for us already. And I'm just going to leave you with a few tips and tricks, rather. It's a tongue twister. Around just different aspects of oppression, especially as it relates to the Cultural Competence Continuum. For racism, there's an organization called the Privilege Institute. They provide challenging, informative, and practical strategies, programs, and resources. From their website, they equip and empower people, organizations, institutions, and communities committed to action and accountability related to issues of diversity, power, privilege, and leadership. And again, all of these are listed on your worksheets with links to these organizations. Up next, there's the Wikipedia of microaggressions. This was created by an advertising company called Zulu Alpha Kilo. Again, there's a link on your worksheets. What's amazing about it is they have a list of all these different microaggressions, whether it's related to race, religion, indigenous issues, gender, where are you really from? I couldn't tell you were gay. Let's have a powwow. Oh, that's so gay. Things like that if you want to learn a bit more about microaggressions and explore different types of microaggressions and their impact that they might have on underrepresented groups. It's a great free resource, actually. There's also a link at breakfastculture.ca under our resources tab. For ACB communities, African, Caribbean, and Black, cbc.ca has Being Black in Canada, another great resource. For sexism, founded in 1962, Catalyst drives change by pioneering research, practical tools, and proven solutions to accelerate and advance women into leadership roles, because progress for women is progress for everyone. Some of the 4 key areas they focus on are advancing women, women in the future of work, leading for equity and inclusion, and then finally, Mark, men advocating for real change. From 2S LGBTQI+ support, great local organization called Pride at Work Canada. From an Indigenous lens, the University of Alberta is currently offering an online course about Indigenous Canada. I remember taking the course. What I found for me personally fascinating was a lot of what it discussed, I recall learning, or I actually used the term being indoctrinated in, during my school years, pre-post-secondary. That said, it was told from a very different lens. And that's what I found fascinating from taking this course. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it for people who might be a little bit more curious. I do want to share this video for you around transphobia. It's about Sam and the You Inside project.
This has clearly been a big week for the LGBT community, but it's also been a big year for the T part of that equation. From
awareness of transgender rights has significantly increased in the last few years, but so has transphobia.
The transgender woman was attacked and the entire thing was caught on tape.
And transphobia can be incredibly harmful.
A 2011 survey by the National Center for Transgender Equality found 41% of transgender people had attempted suicide.
Nobody is born transphobic, however. That's why early education is so essential. So when Gender Creative Kids Canada challenged us to make the world a more accepting place for transgender youth, we knew where to start. With a toy. Sam is designed to teach children about what it means to grow up transgender. By illustrating the emotions felt by many children who question their gender identity, Sam encourages understanding and empathy through play. Each figure represents a common stage that many trans children experience as they grow older, starting with the heart charm that represents the you inside every person. The amount of love for Sam has been overwhelming, but so has the hate.
Oh, it's true, it's true.
The same kind of hate that is so harmful to young people questioning their gender identity. Sam does not teach children how to be transgender. It teaches them how to accept those that are. The You Inside project was launched with a short film, Sam's Story. 9 months later, generous donations brought Sam to life, meaning Sam's story will now be told in schools across Canada and the world. Sam is a little toy with a big mission: to stop transphobia before it starts.
Another great link is the Harvard University's implicit association test. Where you do, it's nothing you can really study for, it's just a great test to take. And it looks at different issues of sexuality, countries, skin tone, to get into shadeism, race, weight, age, gender. For example, I did the weight test. Apparently I prefer the company of more heavier set people. That's a really great one as well, just to get a sense of where you might be. You might think you're somewhere else, and this test might actually show you where you really are. And then finally, unfortunately, there's only so much that we can really cover about cultural competency in a single afternoon training session. But for people who are looking for more in-depth training, there's the IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory. which is a much more in-depth training program. And I just want to say thank you very much. I also want to do a quick little shout out and thank you to our translators today. I believe we have Stefan and Dominique, so thank you to them as well. And for those of you who are still with us, please take a look at the evaluation form. You can scan that with your smartphone devices and just answer a couple of very quick questions for feedback for Breakfast Culture. And if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can scan this and connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And at this time, we have, I think, about a couple more minutes left in this session. I'm going to open the floor to any questions for a discussion. Thank you.
Just wanted to say, Jefferson, this has been a great session. As someone who has experienced kind of extreme privilege growing up and still to this day, you know, I'm trying to be conscious and not amplifying my own voice as much. And I realize that my willingness to talk a lot comes from that privilege. And so I'm trying to consciously be a better listener through this session, not to leave you hanging when you're asking for contributions, but I think I often find myself over contributing as a byproduct of that privilege. So I just want to say thank you for sharing this with us today.
Oh, thank you, Bart. I appreciate that. All right, well, if there's nowhere else, I'm going to turn things back over to Lauren at CamWatch.
All right,
please feel free to fill out the evaluation form.
All right, thank you so much, Jefferson, for a great session. I know I learned a lot from listening in. As I mentioned, we have been recording this just so that we can share it with participants afterwards. So stay tuned for a follow-up email with that and any additional resources, and wishing everyone the best for the rest of their day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in Canada or around the world.
Create a great day, all. Thank you. You've been an amazing group, and thanks again to our translators. Au revoir.